If you had to choose between living in social isolation or being physically tortured, which would you pick? That sounds like an extreme question, and maybe you think everyone would pick the same thing. Maybe you're an introvert, you're like, being alone, I could get a lot done. Or maybe you're like, well, I don't really have that many people in my life anyways. Or maybe you'd pick physical torture because you know that living in isolation is actually deadly. It sounds like an extreme question, but here's the crazy thing. Studies show that living in social isolation is as deadly as smoking 15 cigarettes a day. And we put this idea that we can do it on our own, that if we just pull ourselves up by their bootstraps, at the premium in our society, this rugged individualism. But scientists know that when people live in completely isolated environments, many of them lose their minds, literally lose their minds. Hallucinations, mental breakdowns, extreme stress. And I want to talk today to men. Men specifically. You need to know that you were not designed to live this life alone. Today's part 2 in our 5 C's for men to thrive. And in this series, we've already talked about curiosity. You can find that video in the link below or perhaps right here if you want to see part 1. But today we're talking about connection and the essential piece that connection plays in the way that God made you. And for you to thrive as a man and not live quiet lives of desperation and be angry and frustrated with everything around you, these 5 C's are the key. These 5 C's are what are making other men thrive. Number 2 today, connection. We live in this culture. This is the rugged individual, the lone wolf, the John Waynes of the world, the superhero, the Jason Bournes of today, the self-made man, the pull yourself up by your bootstraps, and whatever the setback, just brush it off, move forward. That same culture is experiencing record-breaking loneliness, depression, and suicide, especially among men. If you don't want to be one of those numbers, let's check this out. Hello, man. Today is part 2 in our 5 C's series of the 5 C's for men to thrive. Talked about curiosity already. Today we're going to be talking about connection. And if you're interested in this kind of information and like this kind of thing, we're testing out the Monday Manhood series. And if you like it, share it with a friend, somebody you think might benefit from it. Hit the like button, hit the subscribe button, let us know in the comments so we know to make more of this kind of content. If this isn't your thing or something else you want to know about that we could bring to you and serve you, let us know. Put it in the comments, send us a message. We'd love to hear that. But today, let's talk about connection. We know already that we live in this self-made man, rugged individualism society. Did you know that 1 in 3 men have no close friends? That's a survey that was just on American life in general. It's from 2021, but I can't imagine it's gotten better. 28% of men say they've talked about their emotions with a friend in the last year. 28%. About 3 in 10, not even quite 3 in 10 have talked about how do you feel? Do you even know how to do that? I learned in my life, I didn't even know how to say how I was feeling. I just thought, just do the next thing, just press through. Well, it's hard to connect if you don't actually even know yourself how things are going. And here's the saddest stat. Did you know that suicide rates for men are nearly 4 times higher than for women? Did you know sometimes you just look around and see, maybe this is the way that's always been done, but it's not working. And the reality is we weren't, as men, meant to live life alone. Today we're talking about connection, the second C in our 5 C's. If you want to be a man who thrives, then you need to know this information. Maybe not every fact and every detail, but I want you to know how important it is. So let's talk about just what happens in our minds, in our brains, when we experience connection with another human being. Have you ever wondered why it feels amazing when you hug your kid or have a great time with your wife or with your girlfriend or whoever you're hanging out with, or maybe just you had a connection with a friend and you're feeling like, hey, that was a great talk. We actually talked about real stuff. It wasn't just like, hey, what driver did you get? How's things going at work? Like you actually talked about your lives. And so what's happening is that's actually called oxytocin. It's a bonding chemical that we experience as humans because we were designed to be connected with one another. It's interesting when you think about it theologically that each one of us has talents and gifts, and there's different personalities and all these different types of things, and God made us to be interdependent with one another. And when you hear him say command, what's the greatest commandment? Love God and love your neighbor. And so your connection with him is supposed to overflow in these relationships with each other, but it gets way more theologically rich than that. And physically speaking, it's not just this chemical, this oxytocin that happens when you have a hug or a good experience with somebody. But when you talk deeply with someone, you can experience that. in your brain, in your body. There's actually chemicals being released. And did you know that actually lowers stress? It increases trust, that oxytocin. It even makes you physically healthier. Harvard's done a study on it. It makes you physically healthier to have friendships. In fact, an interesting study you can check out is the longest study that's ever been done on human happiness. It actually came down to relationships. It wasn't about your background, where you started. It wasn't about social economic, like how much money you made throughout your life. It wasn't about whatever achievements and success you had. It actually had to do with how deep your relationships were with where your satisfaction in life was. And that wasn't a Christian study. And the oxytocin is not exclusively a biblical Christian thing. But God, our Creator, who made us in His image, made us to connect with one another. And if you think about the theology of that, when God made man, it wasn't because God was lonely. He was existing outside of time for all of eternity in perfect harmony. Father, Son, Holy Spirit. And He creates man. He's inviting us into that relationship, to have a relationship with Him. But it wasn't good for man to be the only one like him. And it was not good for man to be alone. And so He made him Eve. So we see that theologically there, one, God inviting us into a relationship with Him. And then two, He gives us other human beings to relate with. And you get to the New Testament, and you got about 60 one another's in the Bible. So it's not even possible to be a faithful Christian and not be in deep relationship. Not just attend church, not just be part of a group, but to have some guys that are your guys. I'm talking about 50 people. I'm talking about like 3, 5. More than one, but at least one. And this is stuff that's not just Bible either. If you're not a Christian, this still matters. A study at UCLA found that rejection or social isolation, it lights up the same pain centers in your brain as a broken bone. So it actually hurts to be alone. Physically in your brain, the same things are happening as if you broke a bone. Think about that. So when you feel alone, it's not just in your head. Now, it is in your head, but what's happening in your head is real. Your brain's crying out for actual connection because you were made for that. And God's word says it throughout. It's not just Genesis. It's not just the one another's. How about this? This is a great man verse. Proverbs. You want to grow wise? Read a proverb every day. There's one for every day of the month. Proverbs chapter 27, as iron sharpens iron, so one man sharpens another. What about Ecclesiastes? Solomon says in that book that he talks about everything's vain, everything's empty, chasing the wind. In Ecclesiastes chapter 4, verses 9 and 10, he says this: 2 are better than 1. If either of them falls, one can help the other up. But pity anyone who falls and has no one to help. Who do you have? Maybe you share this video with that person if you already have somebody. If you don't, let's talk about that. Because here's the reality. You're an image bearer. You were made to reflect the image of God. And like I said, God existed in 3 persons, one being, 3 persons, Father, Son, Holy Spirit, for all of eternity, invites you into that relationship, and He wants you to reflect that perfect harmony relationship with other people. Now, but we know that studies show, we see it in the Bible, we see it in life, that when you're connected, you're actually stronger, that you're physically healthier, and you read the Bible, you're living the way that God intended for you to live. But when you're isolated, you're physically weaker, you're easier to take down. There's an incredible scene in the first Gladiator. I haven't seen the second Gladiator yet. You can tell me in the comments whether it's worth watching. But in the first Gladiator, there's a scene where Gladiator, Maximus Decimus Meridius, armies of the North, like that whole guy, he's rallying the troops together. I think it's called the Turtle Formation, but he tells everybody, stay together. And what happens if you go watch the scene is that there's a couple people who stray off. They get killed. Satan's looking for people to pick off that aren't connected to a stronger bond because they're weaker and they're easier to take out. When you're in isolation, Satan brings lies. And we know psychologically that when you're alone, there's more stress, you're more prone to addiction, more prone to hopeless thoughts and struggles with whether life's meaningful, what's happening, does any of this even matter? There's a darkness to that. No wonder our loneliness and depression and suicide rates are so high. Man, you can't do this alone. You may say, well, I'm the one. I can prove you wrong. Please don't do that. I'm sure you've heard of it in the Navy SEALs. Maybe you've seen that famous speech of the Texas graduation where he says, make your bed. Perhaps you've heard Simon Sinek talk about this, but here's the reality. They've asked all these different instructors of Buds Week. There's this Hell Week that they do. It's 5 days of pure torture. David Goggins, you listen to all these different people talk about this. But if you ask them who makes it through, they tell you. I can tell you who doesn't make it through. They can't tell you who's going to make it through because sometimes the guys that make it through are really thin. Sometimes they're huskier. Sometimes they're tall, sometimes they're short, but here's who doesn't make it through: the rugged individual. The person who thinks that they are to show how strong they are. It's the person who helps other people out that makes it through. They just don't know who that's going to be until they put them in that situation. The person who starts looking to the person on their left and starts looking to the person on their right and starts trying to help them out. Not necessarily the smartest guy there who's going to show you he's thought through everything and going to solve all the problems. Not the strongest guy there, but the one who realizes, I can't do this on my own. I need my brothers, and we're going to link arms. And that's why you hear military people say stuff like this: I got your six. Because they always know somebody has their back. Life is like that. God designed us, not for the pure intensity of what the SEALs go through all the time, and no one wants to live Hell Week, not even the SEALs, on a regular basis. But you can't do it alone. Life does get intense. And you've got to find people. Like I said, you don't need 50 friends, but you need at least 2 or 3 solid guys that make your life better. Not just friends, not just people that come take from you, not people that you're the boss and you provide for all of them, not just people that have to be your friend because you're somehow powerful over them, but people who actually call you up, people who make you love Jesus more, people who make you think about things when you're not always right, people who will help you be a better husband, a better father. You gotta have other men that are sharpening you like iron sharpens iron. How do you do that? Most of us don't even know how to do that, how to even be friends. I'm a pastor. I've stood in the front of my church before with 2 guys who always come to me every week because they don't have anybody else to talk to. And I said to one of them, do you have any friends? No. Do you have any friends? No. I'm going to let you guys meet. They didn't talk. What? Here's the reality. Some of us just because we don't know how. And here's what you have to do in order to have these deep relationships that would actually release oxytocin in your brain. They would fight off the pain of loneliness that's happening in your brain, that your spirit that was designed to live in unity and harmony in a healthy, non-sexual relationship with other men. You've got to be vulnerable. Vulnerability is strength. And you have to be vulnerable in order to have a real connection with someone. I have one friend as a leader in our church and in our community, and we were at lunch one time, and he told me that a pastor that mentored him said, when you brag about your accomplishments, it's like you're boxing, you're putting up a defense. But when you talk about your weaknesses, it's like you're building a bridge and you're inviting people into your life. You think it's weak and it feels like something bad might happen to you. And if you're an athlete, you're always told, don't let them know you can't go to your left. Don't let them know this thing. Military, same kind of deal. We don't want to show them our weaknesses, keep fortifying. But in relationship, it's actually like the opposite there. It's because it's your weaknesses that people can relate to. Your strengths might be admirable and all that stuff, but people aren't drawn to you because everybody thinks you're awesome. Because if everybody thinks that you're so perfect, then they think that you wouldn't understand them. And so you've got to be vulnerable. And you've got to invite others in. Notice when other people are inviting you. My wife pointed that out to me one time early in our marriage. There's a guy who kept calling me. He wanted to get together, play basketball, get together, let's have dinner. And I'm like, I can't. I was busy. I couldn't do something. My wife said, well, you got to call him back and tell him. I was like, well, I can't do it. So he'll just call another time. And she said, eventually he stops calling. So be aware, because I would lack the self-awareness then. And then also, invite other people in. Maybe you do have some connections with other guys, 2 or 3. Well, maybe it's time for you to expand the circle. Not because you guys even need it, but other people need you. Invite some people in. Be kind. Encourage people. Call them. What do you do right now? Here's what I would challenge you to do right now. Text or call somebody, another man. Say, hey, I was thinking about you. Hope you're having a good day. Hey, how's it going today? What's going on with? Maybe he told you something you actually listened. Make some plans. Maybe you and your wife or your girlfriend are going to go out. Why don't you invite somebody else to bring their person and you guys spend time together? You have some other ideas? Why don't you drop it in the comments below? Here's what I want you to know. Men, you were not made to do life alone. In fact, it's literally killing us. And the statistics are saying we're killing ourselves. Who else in our life is going to do it when we're alone and depressed? You were made for connection. So I want to challenge you. Before the next video comes out, next Monday, make a connection. And if you struggle and you can't, let us know. We'd love to help you. This is a community here. It's not just me talking on this channel. Put it in the comments. Hit like, hit subscribe. Let's build a movement of strong men who decide they don't want to live quiet lives of desperation. We're going to be bold and courageous. In fact, Courageous Calling is coming up soon. I hope to see you next Monday.